Hey, so this is the Drunkalogs, a podcast about addiction and recovery in which each guest shares their version of how it was, what happened, and how it is now, and then endures a half-hour Q&A at the hands of your host, Nick Morton. After her mother committed suicide when she was only 7 years old, my next guest started running away from her home in Santa Monica to live with the homeless hippies in Topanga Canyon. After getting in trouble with the law one too many times, her father made her a ward of the court, and she split her adolescence between juvenile detention and foster homes. An horrific shooting in her late 30s led to a profound spiritual epiphany, and she has since devoted herself to undoing the pattern of destruction in her own family, as well as society at large. She tells here the origin story of her son's inspiring nonprofit, HavASole, that gets sneakers on the feet of kids in need. Please check out the link in my liner notes, her memoir, Motherload, and also, please welcome Wendy Adamson.
So yeah, I grew up here in Santa Monica, went to St. Monica's until I got kicked out of school. And
how old were you when you got kicked out of school?
Which time? I got kicked out many times. St. Monica's, I think I was in the 7th grade because I went to Lincoln Junior High.
What'd you get kicked out of St. Monica's for?
For stealing.
For stealing, really? So, yeah. And were you, like, your parents were together? You were in a...
Well, let me just start from the beginning. That my mother was a schizophrenic,
right?
And she was suicidal a lot of the times. And back in the 60s, treatment, they didn't have much in the way of treatment. It was like shock treatment, Mellaril, Thorazine, load them up on heavy meds. And so she, was constantly trying to kill herself when she was home.
Right.
And, as kids, we'd get in the way. We had the...
What year were you born?
53.
53, right.
Yeah. So the first 7 years of my life, the developmental years of my life, when the architecture of the brain is being developed, I was in fight, flight, freeze, or fold, constantly on the lookout, hypervigilant. So needless to say, there was a lot of trauma. And I had 2 brothers, 1 sister, and, we all knew something was wrong with the grownups. Also, my mom drank and my dad drank. He was like a full-on alcoholic. And so, by 7, she actually succeeded in killing herself. She cut her wrist and she crawled into her parents. She was staying at her parents' house because my dad and her had gotten to the point where they were going to get a divorce.
Right.
So she got in the bathtub and pulled a huge chest full of pictures, photographs of her wedding, of her children, over her in the bathtub and drowned. Okay. So when my dad told me that she died, he didn't tell me all that. He said she had a heart attack. But the thing that was, I must emphasize here is that we were a family of secrets, that we weren't supposed to talk about mom's mental illness, even though it wasn't called that. It was just mom's sick. Right. And we weren't supposed to tell the nuns. We weren't supposed to tell our friends. It was like we were in the, this entered into this conspiracy of secrecy within our family system. And so, there's, I believe in hindsight, there is something that happens, you just repress, you just shove back all of that, what is happening, even though I don't think I had the words to convey what was happening. I knew something was wrong. It was more in my gut, I was getting reads, but in any case, she drowned and my dad told me, and it was a heart attack. And I didn't find out. So we had nannies and housekeepers, growing up. My dad would, get people to try to fill in that void. But his picker was off, and he'd bring in these crazy housekeepers, like Pearl, who thought there were spirits in the maids' quarters.
Right.
Like Anne, this woman Anne, who stole all of our appliances one day when I got home from school. She had taken the waffle iron, the toaster, some appliances, I guess, to set herself up.
Right.
And then we had Irene, who the Irish housekeeper, who is the one that finally told me how my mother actually died.
Jeez.
So she would drink. Irene was my dad's drinking buddy.
Right.
She morphed into that, and I suppose he was lonely. He, wanted a drinking partner. So one night when she was tipsy and he had gone out, she told both me and my sister that how mom had died, and of course I was outraged, that, felt betrayed. But I also, felt like I would never, ever be like my mother,
Sure.
And it's like when you say never, it's like giving the universe the exact coordinates where you're going to land.
Right.
When you say it with that much force, I don't know if it's the force, if you're imprinting it into consciousness, but yeah, I would later become my mother.
And how old were you when your caregiver told you the truth?
I was, preteen or
Right.
around there.
What did your dad do for work?
Real estate. He sold real estate in Beverly Hills to the stars,
Right. Right.
Liz Taylor, Doris Day, and
wow.
And
so you get thrown out of St. Monica's is in 7th grade. I guess that's about 13 or 14 years old. And are you like drinking and using it by that point or no?
So, yeah, I mean, it's, the timeline is a little foggy, but I'm writing my, a book about my adolescence and right now. And what I, remember about being an adolescent is just the already self-hatred, already self-doubt. So I start, drinking, I start doing pot, I start running away, I would run away to Topanga, back in the day was like kind of the tail end of the hippie era.
Right.
And there was hippies living down in the caves down in Topanga Creek. Are you from this area?
No, I mean, I've lived in Hollywood for, 25 years, but I don't know Topanga very well. I mean, it's weird that even now it's still kind of, it's still kind of rural and remote. Like the few times I've been up there, it's like, I had a friend who was living up there and growing, magic mushrooms and like, there's some super like fancy places up there, but there's also some real sort of meth den vibe hippie places up there.
And there's some like ayahuasca rituals,
right?
Like
sure.
That's become a big thing like lately up there. But yeah, there's an underbelly that in Topanga. But back then it was all hippy dippy,
right?
And naked hippies down in the creek, and the creek was pretty full. And so I'd run away and stay down there. And ultimately, I think that I acted out the family rage. My sister became a good girl. My brother was, my older brother he became a schizophrenic later.
Right.
And my younger brother, had his own issues. And, we had no life skills, basically, growing up, no foundation. So I started getting in trouble, getting picked up a lot by the police.
Right. And what would they pick you up for?
Under the influence of alcohol or Seconal.
Right.
Later on, loads became a big thing.
What's that?
Loads were a combination of Doradin and something else, another pill that would just kind of get you all wonky,
right.
So I started getting picked up, and my dad couldn't control me anymore. I was raging against him. And so in any case, we went to court for when I ran away after Topanga. I had gotten picked up by the police, and he just kind of threw up his hands and said, I can't deal with her anymore. So right there, they made me a ward of the court, and I went to juvenile hall for the first time.
How old were you?
I want to say 13, 14. I think it's all very compressed.
Yeah. I don't want to parse it to death. And like, juvenile hall is residential?
Juvenile hall is a residential, like, lockdown. It's like, yeah,
right.
it's intense,
and
know.
What was that like?
Well, it was a learning experience. It was, it was scary.
Where in the city
Well, there's 3 juvenile halls in LA. Sylmar Juvenile Hall in the Valley.
Mm-hmm.
There's Downtown Central, and there's Las Padrinas in Downey. And I had been to all 3 of them. I would go to all 3 of them.
Right.
And, also, it's worth noting that I have gone back to all 3 of those as a sober woman and talked to the girls there, which was a very powerful experience for me.
Bet.
Yeah.
And the times that you were in juvie, how long a stint would you go?
Well, when they say, and it's different now than it was then, because they're overcrowded, they're packed in tight.
Yeah.
And, so there you were sent there to look for placement.
Right.
Okay. So my dad couldn't handle me. I'm a ward of the court. I get a probation officer. What can we do with this kid? Well, let's find a foster home that's suited for her. So I think the first time I stayed there was 3 months around. I'm guessing like roughly around 3 months. They found a foster home in La Puente, and, La Puente didn't even have a beach. It's like, how dare you send, it was the ghetto, and it was like from Santa Monica to La Puente was like a little bit of culture shock.
Yeah. I mean, that is a massive, massive change. I mean, and the family that you were placed with, was it a white family or was it a
Mormon family that was hell-bent on saving my soul and converting me?
Well, good for them. And good luck.
They didn't have much luck with me. There was 3 girls there at the foster home. One was already Mormon and from their church, and me and the other one were from juvenile hall. We were placement. And so they tried to convert us. The missionaries would come over every weekend or week and talk to us. And, I was already a defiant, non-compliant. I was becoming, armored up. I would say I was an armored up, broken kid, just.
Do you remember how you would sort of reconcile your privilege with this? Like, I mean, the idea of sort of, you've been going to a private school, your dad is selling real estate to the stars. I mean, my experience with privilege is that like, it feels like you're right and your entitlement, and the idea that is yoinked away from you and you're sent to juvenile hall and then to live in a foster home. I mean, did you believe that you would get back to your life?
Well, that was the goal, to get back. And, so that being the goal, I started to, at least conform to the, school and the structure of this new, because the goal and conforming was more just a manipulation.
Of course.
You know what I mean? It's just a manipulation on my part, going along with the program, going along with the foster parents in order to get back home. My dad would come visit me on the weekends. We'd go, so you know,
And how would
there was no reconciling.
how would he explain this just like hideous choice? I mean, it just so brutal.
Uh, yeah, I think that my father didn't have the tools, and you, none of us did. None
Yeah,
of us
sure.
had the tools or the language to talk about it. It was like there was no family therapy. There was no sitting down and like, we're going to work this out. There was only, don't talk about this,
Right.
and it's like, shame. So, um, in hindsight, I was like, I was adapting, when you say, how do I reconcile privilege? It was like, I was learning how to adapt. I was learning how to adapt when I ran away to Topanga. I was learning how to adapt in juvenile hall. I was learning how to adapt in a foster home. I was adapting, I was taking cues, I was taking
Sure.
cues ever since I was a kid.
Yeah, of course. Fascinating. Wow. So what happens?
So what happens? Well, there is in and out of institutions, Camarillo State Hospital. I end up in like I said, I'd never be like my mother. Well, my mother was in Camarillo State Hospital, and I end up in Camarillo State Hospital.
At what age?
I think the first time was around 14, 15.
Right.
Um, that was actually before I think I went to juvenile hall.
Right.
So I'm like telling you stories that are very compressed, fast, kind of, adolescent, my years. And
Yeah, no,
so
and
I cut my
it's
wrist
so
and
tempting to really try to get into it, but I think it gives us a pretty good picture of what it was like in that period of your life. And so then how does it evolve
yeah.
from there?
So it evolves, sadly, with me circling the drain
Right.
for years. It involves with me meeting someone and falling in love, and ultimately later having two kids, two boys. And it's like still without any tools, still without any skills, until I'm 38 and I'm
Okay, wait, before we get to that though.
oh, okay. I don't know
I'm
how fast.
No, yeah, because I still think there's so much here. Like, how does your drinking and using evolve? I mean, you're in and out of Camarillo State, you're in and out of foster homes. Are you, I mean, are you partying through these sort of teen years?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's really all about partying. It's
Right.
all about partying. It's all about also, um, it's about self-medicating.
Sure.
It's like um, I couldn't metabolize my feelings. you know,
Sure.
and when I took a drink, it gave me the ability to metabolize. I just didn't care. I
And
didn't
did you
care
end
anymore.
out going to college?
No,
No. Did you graduate high school?
no,
No.
no. I
And
ended
so,
up.
but at some point you're an adult, like you're legally of age, and so the court can no longer control you, right?
So yeah, I kind of phase out of the juvenile system and ease into the adult system.
Out of the frying pan into the fire.
Yes, yes. And so going to Sybil Brand, which was county jail, as I think 18
And
was.
for what violation?
No, it wasn't, because once my juvenile, once they kind of wash their hands of you,
Right.
uh, they're done.
Yeah.
So it's all like you get a clean slate. And then I got arrested, I think, for under the influence.
Right.
And it was different than juvenile hall.
And what was that like?
Scary,
Right.
very scary. It was like a full-on prison. Like, this is prison. There's cell blocks here, and there are ramps, cement ramps, and there's a booking process that takes forever, and where they're just, searching you and printing you and taking pictures, and it's, it's scary. It was unlike juvenile hall.
Right. And was your family did they come visit you in adult jail? I mean, was your siblings or father around at that point?
My so my dad would visit me from time to time, but he was getting sick.
Mm.
So my mother's gone, and my dad's drinking a lot until I think he stopped drinking in my early 20s, and it was because he had cirrhosis of the liver.
Right.
He stopped. So my family was, fragmented. My sister was in the Peace Corps in Guatemala at some point. I didn't know where my brother was, either brother. So, it was fragmented, very sad kind of situation. But, I ended up with a guy,
Who is that? What sort of guy?
It was a guy that went, hung around the same people, drank and used like I did. And we just kind of stumbled into each other and stayed there,
A sort of a guy from your background, or a guy from, like a rich kid growing up in Santa Monica, or
a guy from from across the tracks,
right.
Guy that, the bad boy.
Yeah. And so did you guys live together?
We would get married later, and be an item for a while, and
And what were you doing for work?
I'd have jobs here and there, and
like what sort of stuff?
I worked at the LA County Bar Association under a program, a training program, on-the-job training program. I did waitress work at in Westwood, Tiny Nailers, House of Pancakes, just getting jobs, And
are you drinking and using?
Drinking and using, partying,
Right. And is it booze or is it other stuff too?
It's, it was evolving to other stuff. I was doing the Seconal, the pills when I was a teenager. And ultimately, in my early 20s, I started doing heroin.
Right. And are you smoking it or shooting it up?
Shooting it up.
Right. And so then how do you go from, I mean, and then at some point you have children, right? How old are your kids now?
I have a 37 and 40 something, 45.
Right. And what is it like having kids in this sort of state where you're, a junkie, alcoholic?
Well, here's the thing. And I wrote a book about, my experience. What
was it? Sorry, I was going to just ask what the name of the book is.
Mother Load.
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 Right.
So it's kind of, it's a very honest portrayal of me, ending up in jail for the last time. And, I go into it very honestly about, so when I want to get to the point where it kind of unravels.
Sure, go ahead.
All right. So my mother was 38 when she killed herself. I was 38 when I had a psychotic break. And it was a psychotic break induced by doing methamphetamine.
Right.
Okay. So, I didn't know I had, I was in a psychotic break, but my husband, my son is 9, my youngest, my older is 16. He's spending the night somewhere. And so I I realized my ex-husband is out. My husband at the time is
Right.
scoring for this girl, and it occurs to me that he's cheating on me, and he's always out late with this girl. They, getting drugs for her, taking a long time. So I, in the middle of my breakdown, I think that, you know what, it occurs to me, he's cheating on me. I'm going to show him, I'm going to scare him. We have a 38 Smith & Wesson in the house. I wait for them to get back. I wait for my son's asleep. The older one's at his friend's house a couple blocks away. So I wait there. I'm pacing the floor, working myself up into a frenzy. I am going to show him he can't leave me. I'm just going to scare them, mind you. I'm just going to scare them. So he realized let me just say for the record, this is no way to keep your man. So when he pulls up, he's driving her car and he's looking for a spot. I run out with the 38 Smith & Wesson, and fire around over the car, over the car. And he keeps going and turns the corner, and I run after the car with the 38. For some reason, maybe because he was loaded, maybe he was trying to figure out what was going on, but he stopped the car. I run up to the car and I throw myself over the hood like a special ops commando and point the gun at him, and it was like, if there was a moment of clarity, a brief moment of clarity, there would have been that, because I thought, oh my God, if anybody were to see you right now, they would think you were crazy.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So when he turned on the gas again, he put his foot on the pedal. I slid off and I fired another round just to scare them. I pointed down. The bullet ricocheted and hit her in the arm.
Oh no.
Yeah. So as he drove off with her, it occurred to me that I better change my clothes, because the cops might put me in a lineup and somebody could identify me if I'm wearing the same clothes.
Not like they know you.
Yeah. So that was my best thinking. I ran in, I hid the gun out by the back porch. I ran in. My youngest son is asleep, doesn't know any of this has just occurred. His mom changes her clothes. Minutes later, I'm in Lomita. I don't know if you know where that is, but the police, like the whole police force, were there, and I go to jail.
Right. Trying
to argue with them why I've done, or not argue, but convince them that, this, because they have weapons. I'm sure they understand why I would do something like, it was just trying to explain away my actions once again, and there was no explaining. So that was 38, and I ended up going to the county jail. My husband ends up bringing the other woman home to live in my bed.
Oh, brutal.
So, it was crazy. It was really,
how long were you in jail?
I got a year. Right. I got out for good time, work time.
Right.
Once again, manipulating the system. I want out. But in jail, I think is when things really, for this time, I realized what a mess I've made. And the only language I ever spoke was victimese up until that point. It was my mother's fault. It was my father's fault. Now it's my husband's fault. But then I had a realization that, I was the common denominator in all of it.
Right.
And so I had to, I wanted to make I wanted to change the trajectory of my life. And I had no idea how. I didn't know what being a success was anymore,
Sure.
um, or if I ever did. I didn't know if it was like, would it be a bank account? Would it be a career? What would it be? But all I knew, if I had to get sober to find out,
Right.
what I was meant to do, what I was meant to be before I got so derailed.
Sure. And so how did you get sober? Did you get sober in jail, or did you wait until you got out?
Well, I was sober in jail. Yes, I didn't have, any connections in there, although some people do get drugs in there. That was not my experience. I went to a women's and children's transitional
Uh-huh.
living when I got out.
Mm-hmm.
And by that time, my older son is in juvenile hall.
Oh my God.
So, the intergenerational
Jeez.
trauma is being passed down to my children. I
Brutal.
am like my parents, I've adopted my parents' trauma, and they're adopting mine. And we're unconsciously, following in each other's footsteps. And so it's just me and my youngest son, who's about 9 or 10 at the time, 10 probably by then. And we move into a transitional living on 11th and Pico.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like we have our own apartment,
Right.
but it's very reasonable rent. And I start trying to get sober, but I feel so out of my skin. Being in my skin was extremely uncomfortable. Was so self-conscious, so self-obsessed, like, and so much self-hatred, that
Right.
it was just hard. And what changed for me was, ironically, on Mother's Day. What changed, what the game changer was when I was watching Stephen King, The Stand, the
Mm-hmm.
television thing
Sure.
on TV, and I heard 4 gunshots. And I look out the window, and I'm upstairs, and there's blinds. I look down, and there's a kid laying in the street.
Uh-huh.
And up until that point, like I said, I'm very like self-centered, selfish, self-seeking. But at this moment, for some reason, maybe because it was Mother's Day, maybe because I was trying to get sober, I went to the kid. And I like, I got down on, he was on the asphalt, face down. He had taken 4 gunshots, either by a drive-by or a drug deal gone bad. And I just talked to the kid, as he was dying,
Oh God.
and I could hear the rattle in his lungs. And it was like everything in that moment stood still. It was just like, it was me and him. And
Right.
never, ever did I want so badly for someone to live, like, just please live. And the cops came. They thought I was his mother, so they put the yellow thing around us, and until one cop finally, when it was all contained, came over. He says, "Are you his mother?" I said, "No, I live up there." He told me to get behind the line. But they when the ambulance drove away, it was like, I was like on the verge of like a panic attack, or like, oh, is this a sign? Is this some kind of sign from God? I always had a punishing kind of rewarding God from the Catholic Church, and this is something bad's going to happen to my kids, or I translated it all to me, 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 me. And that night, it's like back in my apartment, I wanted to drink.
Sure.
I wanted to drink, and who could blame me if I did?
Yeah.
What stopped me was the cops were out there, still working on the crime scene. And what stopped me is my youngest son was asleep. And so I made a bed, on the floor next to him. He had the bedroom, because I usually slept in the living room. And I made a bed and I was still panicking. I was still in my head. I never got a reprieve from the constant chatter. That's like what alcohol and drugs did for me. It was turned off the noise in my head. So I'm freaking out, still laying on the floor, trying to sleep, when all of a sudden, a presence, I don't know how else to explain. It's very hard to explain what happens, but it's like a presence or a light comes into the room, and it enters my chest and it spreads out, and I'm filled with an absolute sense of peace, like I've never experienced in my life.
Yeah.
It's like peace. It was like I knew with every fiber of my being, everything is all right. Always had been all right, and always would be all right. I knew that to my core, like I'd never, ever. It was so incredibly powerful that it changed me in a way that is so profound that, I didn't know what that presence was. I found out the next day the boy died, and I tried to figure it out. Was that God?
Right.
Was that the boy? Was that the boy? Did the boy come to me to thank me for being there by his side? On Mother's Day, this was somebody's child dying in the street, and the way I had operated up until that point is I never got involved.
Sure.
I didn't want to get involved. If the cops were coming, I don't want to be inconvenienced. I don't want to go to court. But for some reason, the universe pushed me to that boy, and it changed my life profoundly. Because I later I go, that was the first time you've done something for somebody without an agenda.
Right.
You did something, for lack of a better term, purity of heart. You had purity of heart. You didn't want anything from that boy. You didn't want anything for once. You didn't want anything. You showed up for another human being, and it changed my life. So from then on, my life took a turn, and it took, I said, I want to be of service. I want to be of service. I want to, to tip the scales, if you would, but not only just be of service. I want to change the trajectory of mental illness, addiction, and alcoholism that runs rampant through my ancestors, and change it to one of healing and one of recovery. So I started showing up for my boys in a way that I had never shown up for them before. And no one ever showed up for me before, and it's, I started working, and
were you in a 12-step program prior to this event with the boy?
I was going to 12-step meetings, but
right.
Not fully. When you say
right.
I wasn't in. I was in the bleachers.
Was sobriety a condition of your parole?
Yes, I had probation. It was condition of the transitional living that I was staying at.
Right.
So it was one of the conditions on many.
And so were you struggling? You're sort of like, oh, I've got a toehold in a life at the moment. I've got this place. I don't want to be in trouble with the law, so I'm going to stay sober and do what's required of me. Go to meetings so that I don't lose what little I have left.
It was more like there's that part of me that you just like, I want to stay sober.
Right.
But there's a part of me that has, even though because I've stopped using, doesn't mean I don't think about using.
Sure.
So there's still a part of me that it's like every cell and, fiber of my body still wants to use.
Right.
Until that night,
right.
the boy died.
Right.
I was going to meetings thinking that I could never,
right.
This isn't for me, just all of the reasons that separated me. But when I had that experience, I'll call it a spiritual awakening. It changed me. I got out of the bleachers and onto the field.
Right.
Okay. So it's, what I know about now, looking back, is like just dipping my toe into it was one thing, but integrating it into my life and integrating the aspects of myself that had fragmented, as a child, that breaks off from disassociation. Sure. It's been a long process back, but there's like when I was living in that transitional living, I want to share this with you. It's like it was still hard for me to receive help from people, because I had lived a defended life, and I couldn't buy my son, Ricky, a pair of shoes, and he had massive holes in them. And, he kept asking me, Mom, I need shoes. I go, well, I don't have the money right now. I was on welfare, this
Right.
was before I got a job. And this woman, Becky, ended up, she was an alumni of the place, and she ended up buying him 2 pairs of shoes, brand new pairs of shoes. And, it turns out that, I have no defense against kindness. I mean, I could have defended myself against harsh words and everything else, but I had no defense against kindness. And as it turns out, Ricky wouldn't either. But because of his deprivation, his early deprivation, he became a sneakerhead. He grew into an obsessive, that became his addiction.
Right.
Sneakers. And fast forward till when he's in his early 30s, we're restoring our relationship. I am restoring my relationship with my older son. And Ricky has this kind of crisis, if you will, not with drugs or alcohol, but he has a crisis like girls, like just feeling empty, feeling like he's got no purpose. And, he's out on his own, and he looks over at the wall, which is stacked full of 150 pairs of shoes, boxes of shoes, up against one entire wall in his room. And he just asked himself, what the hell am I doing? Why do I have all of these shoes when there's people out there that don't have any shoes? Right. And he thought back about Becky giving him those pair of shoes and how it made him feel. And he decided to give some of his collection away. And he went the next day, packed. I mean, when he called me, I thought, oh, he's going to regret this, right? Right? I didn't say that because I've learned to support my kids' dreams, whatever, I support him. So he drove around LA, put it on Instagram, and soon we're getting shoes from all over the place. Okay, so now it's like, we're going on 7 years. It's a nonprofit my son started called HavASole, SOLE. And we've given over, I think, 25,000 pairs of shoes.
Amazing.
We've partnered with NBA teams. Indiana Pacers, the owner, is like totally like supportive of our organization. He was on Ellen DeGeneres in November. Both of us were on Ellen DeGeneres. And
oh my God.
It's like, that Becky, God bless Becky for buying my son 2 pairs of shoes, with no attachment to like, this kid's going to go out and start his own nonprofit. It's just like she was kind and generous, and it changed his life years later. But it's
does anyone know where Becky is now or who Becky she was?
Passed away.
Right.
Yeah.
And so what do you do now for work?
Well, several things. I work for HavASole.
Right.
I would kind of volunteer for HavASole,
right.
Do some grant writing. I work at a place that helps adolescents, that are struggling with mental health issues. Right. My experience comes in real handy, and I write. And right. I'm writing my second book, And, yeah, I feel like my life has value. If you would have taken a picture of my life living in transitional living, with me and my son on welfare, a snapshot of my life then, it would have been a very, sad story. But, as life is not a snapshot, it's a moving picture, and, we get the chance to redeem ourselves. We get the chance to be there for my kids, and my relationships with my boys are like beyond anything I could have imagined. They,
What's your older boy doing now?
he's a dad. He's got kids, and he's just, he goes to every, practice. He goes to every game because they're very, my grandchildren are little jocks, so he's, again, he's showing up for his kids in a way that is like, we're changing that trajectory, and healing the family system.
And your ex-husband, are you guys in touch?
We were, he ended up getting clean,
Right.
For a while, for 16 years.
Wow.
And then he had some pain. He started doing methadone for pain,
Right.
and ended up overdosing at one point, but survived that. And so, yeah, he's living in Torrance. I don't have a whole lot of contact with him, but I feel like we're clean. I made amends, as crazy as this sounds, to the girl I shot. And that was not an easy thing to do. It's like,
how did she take it?
Well, she was hesitant at first. It was like, I could hear the guardedness in her voice, but I was talking, really fast and just like owning my shit,
Right.
and the best she could do is just say, I made some mistakes too.
Right.
And that was it. It didn't need any more.
Yeah, that's big. That's huge, I think.
Huge.
And how long have you been sober now?
27 years.
27 years. Wow.
Yeah.
And what did you do just when you were sort of rebuilding your life from that moment of tending to that dying boy in the street, like to get yourself off welfare and kind of pull yourself back up? Like what was the course of your life from there to here? Just sort of briefly.
Just briefly, I think that what I learned from that, going to that boy, was that we are here for each other.
Right.
We're meant to be of service. So I started to align myself with a purpose that I felt like why I was here. And at the time it was just, helping other addicts and alcoholics.
Right.
So I started working in a detox. And in detox, when one of my clients was sitting across from me, I could see how my experience of, all of the drugs, all of the histories, all, that I had could help another human being, and so, it's what I like to, teach my kids, that everything that we've been through, everything has value. No more secrets, no more lies. That's why I wrote the book, is because in meditation, I have a meditation practice. I had a clear realization, you're supposed to write this book. And so I wasn't a writer. I'm a high school dropout. So I took lessons and but what drove me to write the book, I go, what about all those girls in juvenile hall? What about all of those women in jail? I know if I would have had a book or a role model back then, perhaps I would have gotten through the eye of the needle to the other side, but I didn't. I do now. I didn't then. So I wrote the book. They were like my motivation, because I felt like I can't do this. I can't expose myself on this level. I lose control of who knows my story. And but I kept doing it to be of service. And as soon as the book comes out, soon as one of the first people that read it said, this book could help a lot of women in jail. I said, I know. She goes, well, I want to donate 30 books to women in jail.
Right.
So she donated 30 books. And you think it's easy just to slam dunk in the jail? It's not. But I know somebody who works for the city council, and I was able to get those books in jail. And it's like validation from the universe that this was meant to be, that I'm, was meant to write it. And that was the, service is what drives me. It's like, how can I serve? How can I impact others?
And what was it like, now that we've sort of traveled your journey here, to go back to juvie and talk to those girls? And when did you do it?
Well, I did it not long after that boy died, because then, when I say not long after, maybe within a year.
Right.
So by then I'm like trying to use my story, and so going back to Sylmar Juvenile Hall, standing there in front of those girls, they were riveted, they were listening, and for me, it was a part of integrating integration, because I think that, like I said earlier, is like we fragment, and it's like I abandoned the 13-year-old Wendy. I abandoned the 14-year-old. And it's like going back into juvenile hall was like finding her. It was like reaching through the portal and finding her and pulling her out of that, and it's like, and integrating the parts of me that I had left behind, if that makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense to me. And I've never heard it sort of described that way. I mean, in therapy, I spend a lot of time sort of getting in touch with these parts of me that are, fragmented. And, but it is interesting. Like, there are chapters of my life where, I feel like maybe I've closed those, as you say, abandoned those versions of myself, because there's just pain associated with it that I don't, pain and joy and just a whole welter of emotions that I don't necessarily want to get roiled by all the time, and sort of protect myself from. And sometimes the traveling back to those places has been a way of like showing adult contemporary Nick that like there's nothing to fear from any of that, that like there is some level of revisiting those selves and reconnecting with yourself that does bring you peace, and, as you say, sort of integrates those things that you've abandoned in the past. It's so funny because looking at you now and talking to you, you seem so sort of professorial and, it reminds me of like sitting in my psychiatrist's office or something. You seem so put together, and it's really hard to imagine you in juvenile hall, let alone rolling commando style over your husband's hood to pull a gun on him. So it's obviously been a crazy journey. You've obviously lived a lot of life, and look, it's great. It's really very, very interesting, and so thankful for you to take the time and share the story with me. I'm going to look forward to picking up a copy of Mother Lode. Is it on Amazon? Can we find it there?
On Amazon, yeah.
And we'll just be in touch, and let's keep in touch. It's really, really nice to meet you.
It was really great to meet you. Thank you so much.
All right, cool. Take care. Thanks for listening. You can support this podcast at patreon.com/thedrunkalogs.